Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and it appears that Boris Johnson is to cap his summer of partying and holidaying with a self-indulgent tour of the country in order to cement his legacy. Frankly, if I had his legacy and his money, I'd be wanting to spend the rest of my life living under a rock. But I thought I'd discuss what his legacy actually is rather than what he's going to try and rewrite it into. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the only genuine achievement that you can really lay at the feet of Boris Johnson was the end to bitter infighting in the Conservative Party over Brexit. There's no achievement for the country or for us, sorry, but for the Conservative Party, they're quite happy that he stopped the infighting over Brexit. After losing vote after vote in Parliament after becoming Prime Minister, he unlawfully prorogued Parliament in order to try and engineer a crash out of the EU without a deal, as a deal was proven a little bit elusive for Parliament. The Supreme Court ended up with the case before them, and they asked the government to, you've got these reasons for proroguing Parliament. Oh yeah, those reasons are perfectly valid. Could you just sign an affidavit confirming that these were the actual reasons for proroguing? The things that you told the public and probably the Queen. Boris Johnson refused. In fact, none of the involved government ministers were prepared to do this. I wonder why. All they were being asked to do was sign a legal document which said that they weren't lying, where if it was found out they were lying, they could go to prison for perjury. But they wouldn't sign it. Shock of shocks. So the Supreme Court had no option but to conclude that the prorogation was not for the purposes stated and declared it null and void. Parliament then resumed and Johnson had to think again. I say that, Dominic Cummings had to think again. Eventually, opposition leaders, for reasons best known to themselves, from a position of having Johnson completely by the balls boxed in, gave him the general election he wanted. He won a large majority on the back of two main promises. First, get Brexit done. He promised that the pain would all go away. We've had this divisive politics for years. We can't focus on the important issues of the day. I've got this plan to just make it all go away. He had his oven-ready deal. Negotiations would be over. That's it. It's all done. What we actually got were never-ending negotiations. Negotiations that are still going on now. Very acrimonious negotiations. Negotiations that are scheduled to carry on until 2026. And then we start all over again. Carry on forever. And now he says his oven-ready deal is a load of crap and should be thrown in the bin. The second campaign promise was to level up the parts of the country left behind. Close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Yeah, that gap's widened quite a lot since Johnson took office, and his specifically levelling up promises have all either had funding removed or been scrapped altogether. Seriously, you look at the specific promises in the manifesto, not a single one is going ahead as described. Then COVID came along. We initially started to deal with it. The NHS ran their successful track and trace programme. When someone was found to have the virus, they contacted everyone they'd been in touch with. They got those to isolate, kept the spread of the virus under control. Then Boris Johnson told us to let COVID punch us in the face, specifically on the chin, which is like the worst part of the face to let someone punch you, I've got to tell you. It didn't go at all well. In fact, it went so badly that we were forced into a lockdown a few weeks later. Only because Boris Johnson delayed even that decision, it ended up being a longer and deeper lockdown than for similar countries. And his government forced care homes to take elderly discharged hospital patients without the need for a negative COVID test. Result was COVID positive people in care homes. That resulted in at least 20,000 extra deaths in care homes alone. At the start, we were told we'd do well to get away with 20,000 COVID deaths altogether. Right now, with no mitigations in place, we're looking at nearly 190,000 deaths as we march towards winter without anyone treating the prospect seriously at all. We now have a serious problem with long COVID as well. Many people who recover from COVID are found to have problems with brain shrinkage. It doesn't just affect intelligence, but makes people more prone to other serious problems. We're now seeing more reports of people suffering other potentially fatal conditions linked to the long-term damage left by COVID. This is likely resulting in more deaths that are not put down to COVID, it's something else, but wouldn't have happened had they not been infected. Part of the problem was a failure to supply health and social care workers with PPE. The government refused to get stocks in when they were warned we were in trouble the previous year. We were told then we don't have enough stocks. The government said, now we want to save money. And that's before anyone even knew about COVID. Then COVID hit. The government were told again, like, this is serious now. We need to get stuff in. No. Because we're going to take it in the face. We're going to get punched in the face, you see, by the virus. It's only a virus. I mean, how hard can it punch us in the face, for goodness sake? Then it hit us. Oh, actually, it's punching us really hard. The government still refused to order PPE through the usual routes and instead set up what we now know is their VIP lane. We didn't find out about it until much later, but it involved giving large amounts of public money to Tory donors and friends to buy the PPE on behalf of the country and pocket the profits. It meant spending way over the odds, and because some of these people had no more idea of how to buy PPE on a large scale than I do, they got ripped off a lot. Frequently, the PPE was of no use at all. Money was not clawed back, however, because it was never about the PPE, but a bung to donors and friends. A similar level of fraud occurred over the much more generally appreciated furlough scheme. The government still refused to claw that money back because they know some of the fraudsters are Tories. One of them may be the wife of the former Chancellor. Then, after stopping the NHS track and trace system, Johnson decided to restart it again. But instead of getting the NHS to start it again, who had a proven track record of competence, he gave a £37 billion budget to a former jockey and failed businesswoman, Dido Harding, married to one of his close chums. That went badly. So badly, in fact, that Parliament described it as not helping at all. Not just that it didn't do as well as other countries' systems who spent way less. No. It was so bad that Parliament said there was no evidence that it had helped at all. And if you think that was bad, do bear in mind that Boris Johnson gave Dominic Cummings a budget of £100 billion for his Operation Moonshot. I don't know what happened to that money at all. Then we mustn't forget his personal behaviour during the various lockdowns. At the same time as he was telling people they couldn't engage in simple social interactions as saying a last goodbye to loved ones and telling many that they couldn't even attend the funeral, he was establishing a culture of boozing and partying at Downing Street. In fact, so regular with these socials that Sue Gray said that they wouldn't be the sort of thing that's acceptable at any time. It resulted in Boris Johnson being, I think, the only Prime Minister in history to be officially marked as a criminal in office. I hesitate to use the word convicted because it wasn't via court, although if he thought it was unfair, he could have gone to court, but he didn't. So he received a fine for a birthday party he attended, so he's now a criminal in office. Then they tried to pretend COVID had gone away, so he got onto more mundane policy areas. He had this idea for a bridge between Scotland and Northern Ireland, part of his crass attempts to keep the Union together through the cunning use of roads. He's far too interested in the old Roman Empire. But then someone pointed out there's actually quite a lot of World War II munitions in the way. We don't want our construction workers being blown up, Prime Minister. So then Johnson said, OK, I'll tell you what, we'll have a tunnel instead. Yeah, but the munitions are still there, Prime Minister. Don't you remember? We don't want to blow up the construction workers. OK, he said. We'll bypass it all with a load of undersea tunnels, right? Absolutely loads of them. And a massive underground roundabout under the Isle of Man. You think I'm joking at this point, being facetious. No. This was actually a reported plan. I say a plan. It was a Boris Johnson plan, which is to say it's an intended outcome with no actual planning behind it. This idea was also shelved. Can't imagine why. Then we should remember that Boris Johnson elevated the son of a KGB officer and himself someone with links to Putin's regime to the House of Lords. Someone with the patronage of the Kremlin in Parliament. Nice one. He tried to disband a parliamentary committee which investigates standards in order to get one of his political mates off the hooks for corruption. He finally fell because it transpired that he'd put a known sex offender into a position where he would be dealing with the potential victims of sexual harassment. Even at the end, Johnson could have just stepped down and let a caretaker Prime Minister deal with things. He didn't. He insisted that he needed to stay on so that the work of government could continue. Well, the work of government needed to continue. We have had crisis after crisis this summer. Where is this government then? Nowhere to be seen. Boris Johnson's legacy is not of sunlit uplands, but failure, suffering and depravity. You know, he's left us with the highest tax burden for generations and heading into a recession, with a cost of living crisis that people just cannot afford. And he's not even sorry. He's going off on a tour, a victory lap around the country. He's not even sorry. He's not even ashamed. Worse, he actually thinks he's been hard done by. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.